Namaste. I am Dr. Ujjal Mukherjee. Today we will discuss about moderators and mediators. So we will try to understand what is the meaning of moderator, what is the meaning of a mediator in the research context. So let's move on. So we will start with moderators first. So supposedly let's come up with an example in a real life scenario. So if I say that I can measure the amount of thirst to drink water and its influence on the amount of water that I consume. If I am able to measure both of this, means if I am thirsty, I tend to drink water. So in that case, if I see the amount of thirst that I have, I measure it somehow, and then I see how much of water do I consume when I get water. But then it will not always be high or low. It depends on a couple of more things. For example, it can depend on the temperature of water. I am extremely thirsty and I am provided hot water or warm water. Probably the consumption will not be that high. On the contrary, if I am given it room temperature water, I might consume water more. Or even if it's a cold water, I might consume more or less. So my consumption of water is not only dependent on the amount of thirst that I have, but also is dependent on the temperature of water. Now, what does it mean? It means that the temperature of water actually works on the relationship between the independent variable here, which is amount of thirst, and the amount of water consumed, which is the dependent variable. So we will call the temperature of water as the moderator. What is the role of a moderator? The role of a moderator is confined to the space that it defines the relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable. It increases or decreases the strength between the independent variable and the dependent variable. Which I have mentioned here, that strengthens or weakens the relationship between the IV and the DV, which is the independent variable and the dependent variable. So if I have to draw a graphical representation, how it might look like? If I have red as hot water, and these are my two independent and dependent variable. Amount of thirst is my independent variable, amount of water consumed is my dependent variable. So supposedly this is the graph for hot water, means I drink this much of water when I am hot. It's a graphical representation. But the consumption might actually change. With similar amount of thirst, the consumption of water might change if it is slightly colder water. This is out of research context. Now I will try to explain this in a research context. So for example, this is a paper which is written by me and one of my fellow scholars. Her name is Shrija. So we wrote this paper which is the influence of workplace spirituality on job satisfaction, a study among employees working in the IT industry. So this was a paper published in a journal, in an international journal. The moderator in this case is the demography of the individuals, which is the male or female. The gender of the individuals served as the moderator. So can anybody draw this? Try drawing this, a conceptual diagram of this. I am giving you 5 seconds to think and draw. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so how will it look like? So, workplace spirituality, look at the name of the title of the paper. Workplace spirituality is the independent variable, job satisfaction is the dependent variable. Which is the moderator? The gender is the moderator, male or female. So how will it look like? The diagram look like this, right? So this is called the conceptual diagram of this title or the objective of the study, right? So this is how it is diagrammatically represented. Now, if I have to go into the graph after you do your analysis and all, after you finish off with your analysis, and then you find that a particular gender, suppose let's take for example, male has got, male, in case of males, the workplace spirituality, as the workplace spirituality increases, job satisfaction also increases. I repeat, in case of males, the workplace spirituality increases and the job satisfaction increases. In case of females, the workplace spirituality increases but the job satisfaction decreases. So these are two different things happening for two different genders, right? Now how will I draw the diagram? So I have my workplace spirituality on the x-axis, my job satisfaction on the y-axis, and here let's take red as the male. So as the workplace spirituality increases, the job satisfaction level also increases. And I told for the females, it might be, this is just an example. For the female, supposedly the result comes as this, that the job as the workplace spirituality increases, job satisfaction rate decreases. So this is a good example of how a moderator effect might look like. Right. So now we move on to a mediator effect. So what is a mediator? We go on with the same example. So there is somebody who is thirsty, or I am measuring the amount of thirst. So if I am thirsty, what will I do? I will look for a source of water. And then if I get the source of water, I will drink water from it. So there is something which comes in between my independent and dependent variable, right? So what is the role? Here it describes the whole process from the amount of thirst to the consumption of water. In between comes one variable which can be the source of water, which I assume in this case, because this is a hypothetical example, which I assume that it is measurable, right? So the source of water comes in between my thirst, the thirst that I have, the level of thirst that I have, and the amount of water that I consume. So there is something coming in between, means it describes the process. I go back once more to tell you something interesting here. Just understand this part. My in case of moderator, I told this is when I will drink more water or when I will drink less water. So moderator talks more about the when part of a question, of a research question. On the contrary, when I am talking about mediators, I am talking about the how part. So if somebody is thirsty, what is the process that he drinks the water? He will find a source of water and then he will consume it, right? So what is the role of the mediator? The mediator explains the process, how the IV influences the DV, how the independent variable influences the dependent variable. Now coming to a research context, this is a paper written again with one of my scholars, Sujata MS. So here's look at the title of the paper, the mediating effect of academic satisfaction. So which is the mediator? Academic satisfaction on the relationship between psychological capital and performance of undergraduate students. Now which is the independent variable in this case? Psychological capital. Which is the dependent variable? Performance of the undergraduate student. Which is the mediator? Academic satisfaction. So we know the three variables involved here. So which is the independent variable? First we will write the independent variable. Now once we write the independent variable, which is psychological capital, it influences academic satisfaction, which in turn influences performance of undergraduate students. So this is the whole process that I am describing. So psychological capital of the students will affect their academic satisfaction, which in turn will also influence the performance of undergraduate students. But there may be two paths to this. Psychological capital can directly influence performance of undergraduate students, or there might be an alternative path, which is psychological capital influences academic satisfaction and the academic satisfaction in terms influences performance of undergraduate students. So the horizontal line that you see from psychological capital is path 1, psychological capital to performance of undergraduate students. That is path 1, which is one way how psychological capital affects performance of undergraduate students. But there is an alternative path also, which is psychological capital affects academic satisfaction, which in terms influences the performance of undergraduate students. When you test the hypothesis, there might be a chance that psychological capital directly influences performance of undergraduate students, and there is nothing in between, which is academic satisfaction. Means that path is not applicable, or it might be both the paths. There might be two paths which are applicable, that both the hypothesis actually comes true in terms of psychological capital also influences performance of undergraduate students, and there is an alternative path that this also influences. So both the paths can actually come true in terms of how psychological capital influences performance of undergraduate students. So there might be two paths, or there can be one path. So your analysis will decide whether we actually accept or reject the null hypothesis, and then say that there is an alternative path also, or there is only one path. Or there can be one path itself, which from psychological capital to academic satisfaction to performance of undergraduate students. That can only be also be one single path how psychological capital may influence performance of undergraduate students. This will be decided by your analysis. The results will decide whether which path is significant in nature. Whichever path is significant in nature, or even if both the paths are significant in nature, so then we will say academic satisfaction. Supposedly both the paths are significant in nature, then we can say that academic satisfaction partially mediates the relationship between psychological capital and performance of undergraduate students. Though this partial mediation is with a pinch of salt, because a lot of scholars actually are saying that there is nothing called partial mediation, right? But then sometimes what happens, this horizontal path, direct arrow between psychological capital and performance of undergraduate students, it's totally insignificant. So there is only one path. One path means how psychological capital can influence performance of undergraduate students. There is only one path, which is via academic satisfaction, which means psychological capital will influence academic satisfaction, which will in terms influence performance of undergraduate students. In this case, we call it total mediation effect. Total, there is only one path. Totally the only path which is available how psychological capital can influence performance of undergraduate student is via academic satisfaction. This is called full mediation. If you have any question, you can post it under the link, and I will try to answer to the best of my ability. Thank you for your valuable time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.